On this episode of our Axis and Allies 1940 Global 2nd Edition tutorial series, we're going to talk about Japan and its strategic options in the game, at least in the early game. Japan is one of those powers that has several different options. Being in the Pacific and being mostly naval focused gives you a lot more freedom than like the Soviet Union or Germany before it. So, we're going to talk about the two main strategies, and within those, there's like two or three sub-strategies. So, A is you focus on the Pacific. You know, you're building a lot of ships, you're going for all the islands, you're going to tangle with the Americans and the Australians a lot more. Option B is the continental strategy. You know, you're going to go into China or Southeast Asia, maybe up here in the Soviet Union. You could do one or the other pretty well. You can't do both of them well, at least not sustainably. Maybe in the first like 3 turns, you could be pumping out ships plus all kinds of ground units, and you can make all kinds of stuff happen. But very, very quickly as Japan, you're going to become overstretched, and the Allies are going to start picking apart at all the seams of your empire. As Japan, you kind of have a money problem. You only start with 26 IPCs. Sure, that's still not terrible. Like Italy starts with 10. But the problem is you have so many things you need. You need all kinds of infantry. You need planes. You need ships. And all of these things are expensive and they add up. Let alone if you want to try building factories or naval and air bases. So as Japan, you need money and you need a lot of it quickly. And one place you're not going to get it is your national objectives. You're not going to get too much from those. Sure, if you don't bring the Allies in, you get 10 IPCs from that. Cool. But the problem is you're not able to attack the Allies if you want to collect that. So you're denying yourself all kinds of other potential money. You just limit yourself to China. Which, I mean, it's fine. Like, if you're talking to Germany and you're going to coordinate on, like, this continental strategy, you're going to go for taking out the Soviets, going through China, then into the Soviet Union, I mean, that's an option. You can do that. It might hurt Japan in the long run, possibly in a devastating manner, but you can definitely defeat the Soviet Union that way. It's an option, you know? Theoretically, you can get there in 4 turns. You can start attacking Soviet territories. Theoretically. In reality, the Chinese are probably going to plonk big forces in the way, but sure, they buy, 2 turns maybe? And then you'll reach Soviet territory. It's not like you're going to be taking Moscow as Japan, unless some weird stuff's happening, but it's an option you have. Also, you can threaten all this money up here. Sure, they're all ones, but the Soviet Union needs every IPC they can get. That I see as like continental strategy 1 is, going through China into the Soviet Union and or focusing up here in the north to get to the Soviet Union. And the other part, which I think is far more common and probably going to get you more out of it as Japan itself, maybe not as the Axis as a whole, but that would be focusing on the south and going for India and Southeast Asia. Now, you can definitely get help from the Navy. I think the Navy is very important if you're going to go down this way, but you don't strictly require it. If you want to do it fast, you need the Navy, but if you can't afford to send them down here, then it's not that big a deal. You can still take India. It's just going to take you longer. Then we have our various Pacific strategies. There's really like 3, and only 2 of them are viable. So the first one, the least likely to succeed, is like the Central Pacific strategy. So, you're building like carriers, destroyers, and stuff. And this is mostly just to keep the United States at bay. You're not getting any money out here. There's really not much to be had. Sure, Hawaii is worth 1 IPC. Cool. Iwo Jima is worth 1, but you already have that. there's not really anything else out here. 2 IPCs, big whoop. You're not getting a lot of a return on your investment. And the problem is when you're all the way over here around Hawaii, you're very close to the U.S. West Coast. So they're just going to be pumping out ships, and they're going to beat you in any kind of production game. You're not going to be able to outlast the Americans with your ships. It's not going to happen. But again, I see that as something to buy time, maybe take pressure off of the Europeans, the European Axis powers, if they're having a bad time, or if, as the Axis, your joint strategy relies on them winning in Europe. Now we have our slightly more viable options. Our first one is going for Australia. Australia is going to be a thorn in your side for probably the whole game. They're never going to be such a big threat that you have to take them out immediately. But the longer you let them survive, the more annoying they're going to become. Simply because they're going to be putting down all kinds of infantry here. So by like turn 8, they're going to have like 30 infantry or something. And you're not going to be able to fight that. You're never going to be able to take that. And once they have that big stack of infantry, they're going to start building planes or ships. And those planes or ships are going to start harassing your navy. Their planes might start going to Malaya and another continent. Their ships, they might start raiding your convoys. So yes, you can definitely make a strong argument for getting a big fleet over here to the Caroline Islands with tons of transports, sending it down here to C-Zone 62 and taking Sydney as early as possible. I don't see any big flaws with that. It might be kind of tough to hold, at least long term, but it's doable. You know, especially if you keep that big fleet down there, the Americans are going to have to take several turns building up a fleet, then more building up transports, and then the ground units to put on them to come down here and attempt to take it. And if you hold it, awesome. You buy yourself even more time to refortify that. So Australia, I think, is a pretty decent option, especially since, you know, you're going to get, 9 IPCs for Australia itself, and then if you take New Zealand, that's an additional 2. You can even put down a second factory there, so that's up to 6 units there you're building every turn. So there's, Australia's potentially pretty easy to defend if you can take it. And then we have the safest strategy as Japan, the going for the East Indies. I've heard some people call these the Money Islands, and I really, really like that name. These are really easy to get. Holding them can be more difficult, but getting these is pretty much a piece of cake, and I think you should do it every game. Every chance you get, I think you should come here. You could even make arguments for going there before even taking the Philippines. I would just ignore the Philippines and go straight here to get that money. Or just, sink those 2 ships and then come down here, leave the ground units alone. Sure, you're giving the Americans extra money, but the Philippines still isn't going to last that long, maybe 1 turn. And you just get so much extra money from down here. Plus, you get a national objective. This is like the only one you're actually going to really get. Your national objectives are controlling Sumatra, Java, Borneo, and Celebes. That's an additional 5 IPCs for that one. Another one revolves around controlling a ton of these little islands out here. I don't know which ones off the top of my head, but you have to control like 5 or 6 of these different islands. And they're so far away and so spread out that it's just really hard to hold all of them. So the odds are you're not going to be able to do it super easily. And then their other national objectives are like controlling Sydney, Calcutta there in India, Honolulu, and San Diego. If you ever have Japanese troops in San Diego, something has gone wrong as the American player. But moving on. Money Islands, I think, are something you should always be going for. At least it should be in the back of your mind. There's just so much money there on the table that I really don't think you should ignore it. Don't ever forget about these. The British, they aren't really going to be able to take them. Like, as long as you keep a couple of ships down here, they're not going to be able to do much about these. Especially if you still have your planes. Japan starts with like 21 planes. So anyone that comes around with ships has to be wary of all these planes coming from the sky and destroying them. So you should be able to defend these pretty easily. And they're not too far from Japan. It's like a 2-turn trip. But as Japan, those I think are all your options. You can go continental north, continental south, central Pacific, Australia, money islands. And like the German strategies, some of these you could put together. You can probably try doing a couple of these at once. Like you can go continental north and south. You can go money islands in Australia. You can go money islands in continental south. You just have a lot of flexibility. The thing with Japan is you just need to know when to stop. Because like I said, you don't have tons of money to work with in the beginning. So you can only push so far. Like in China, China's super weak. Like, look at that. They only have infantry. They have one fighter. They can build artillery, theoretically. They're not that big of a threat. But the problem is, you don't want to be putting ground forces in China for a lot of the game. You have other things you need to worry about. So China becomes kind of like a backwater, like a secondary theater. And if you let China build up, they're going to turn all their territories into these huge fortresses that you can never take. Usually down here in like Yunnan or Sichuan, you'll never be able to take those if you ignore them for too long. But then again, if you're being too aggressive in China, you run into the problem of overextending. You get to like the last 3 Chinese territories and you have like nothing left. And whether the British come from the south and start liberating Chinese territories or the Chinese do it themselves, it just starts to fall apart and becomes a disaster. So you just really need to know when to stop as Japan. A lot of people really like building factories as Japan, like on the Chinese coast there, those 2 territories. And I think I really support that as well. Anything to get you away from relying on transports. I would want my transports to be working on all these islands. I wouldn't want to have to use them to drop troops on the continent continuously. Because transports, they can be destroyed. A factory, it's not going to be destroyed. It might be rendered useless, but it's never just taken off the well. Odds are it's not going to be taken off the board. The Chinese have a special rule that if they take a territory with a factory on it, they remove it, but just don't let that happen. China's not typically super aggressive, so they probably won't, but just don't be dumb and let them do that.